Yeah,
Okay.
it's a podcast. It's amazing. It's
Mm.
such good science, and they review great studies, and they have the best speakers. In fact, though, my favorites guest speaker on that show has been Tommy Wood, and I know
Hmm.
you had Tommy on your
Yes.
show, and so they have just brilliant minds, an eclectic group of researchers that are passionate, and so I can just tell, Maxim, you're going to love that show like I do. And the
Okay, I should check it
brightest,
out.
yeah, for sure. So somebody went on, hit their show, and talked about how they were on somebody else's podcast, and they talked for 3 hours
Oh
on
no.
on this podcast, yeah, and it wasn't recorded,
Oh
and
my.
they just did it right there. They said, let's just do it again.
Oh fuck.
So
Jesus.
six hours,
Crazy.
yeah. But that's for the love of science, right?
Right.
You'll do that things. I so love talking about science, and
Mm.
particularly biological optimization. That,
Mm.
yeah, I will do backflips to make it happen. So happy to come back.
Yeah, this is amazing. So thanks for finding the time and getting back on my podcast. It was a real pleasure to talk to you last time. And so maybe let's make the intro this time a little shorter. So just um, briefly explain who you are, how you came to become the person you are. So basically becoming that interested in health optimization, right? Because that's not what we are trained for as physicians. Like even me as a medical student, I realize more and more it's the paradigm of we wait until the patient presents themselves with symptoms, with disease, and then we kind of treat these symptoms, and we're not really trained to look at what is causing the problems in the first place, which is a real shame in my estimation. But yeah, tell us how your journey has
Sure.
been.
Sure. So I got interested in health from a patient who was themselves very healthy, and
Mm,
really originally just told me to adopt a low carb, high fat diet, paleo diet. And I didn't know anything about it. I read it and I did it. And at the time, I had multiple medical problems, severe heartburn, eczema. I had restless leg syndrome. I had obstructive sleep apnea. I had clogged arteries,
mm,
and I adopted that approach. And BPH. So I was waking up 4 or 5 times a night to pee,
mm.
and he didn't tell me that that would help anything. I was heavy at the time. He just said you'll lose weight and feel great. So, but I started these things without any expectation that any of those symptoms would get better, because I'm a doctor, and like the only thing that's going to get those symptoms better to take pharmaceuticals.
Sure.
So I was taking medicines, and I when I went on that diet, and I've been taking medicines for years. When I went on that diet, started adopting a paleo lifestyle, all my symptoms just slowly went away. And I don't know, it's kind of weird. I just didn't really see that they were improving. I wasn't paying attention. They were so slow, right? It's like your hair graying. You don't really see it; just happens.
Yeah.
So, without my symptoms all gone, I decided. I finally realized that I wasn't getting up anymore to pee, and I was peeing like a 16-year-old.
Hmm.
And I decided that this did not fit in the paradigm of my medical training, and I should research it. So I moved my family to Minneapolis. I joined a research practice. I took a um, complete change, and started researching from being an emergency medicine doctor to actually researching the reversal of disease. And so our practice was to do MRIs on
Yes.
patients, looking at a particular biomarker that my research practice, the founder of our research practice, Dr. CJ Zen, who figured out this biomarker was really important, visceral fat. And from years, really, I think what happened, Maxim, is from
Hmm.
years of working with an MRI and tracking that biomarker, we would test things like walking and running
Right.
and sprinting
Mm.
and various different practices. So I got good at following this biometric of visceral fat. And I realized there is a big difference. Most physicians and most people are trained with the concept of improving your health, trying to get more healthier. But it just slowly dawned on me that, well, with the capacity of following the right metrics, you can't, we should be doing something very different. Instead of just trying to get healthy, you should try to get as healthy as possible, because the consequences of the absence of health means disease. And disease, for the most part, becomes something that is a bit of an expectation for people as you get older, and it's really not necessary. So I view my life, my really second half of my life, as really a life lived without disease and optimizing myself. And so all my symptoms completely have gone away. All my medical conditions have gone away. I had Barrett's esophagus, by the way, which are pre-cancerous metaplastic changes in my esophagus. Wow. That went completely away. I no longer, all my biopsies were clear of that. Nobody could explain it. It's sort of like doctors say, that's just a medical miracle. It just happens and we don't have to explain.
Right.
No, that's a life well lived.
Yeah.
Eating the right things, doing the right things, not eating the wrong things, not doing the wrong things. And that's really what it comes down to. So
I mean, you do have to put some effort in it, right? So exercise is a form of there is commitment attached to that, right? You can't just it's not something that's easy in a sense.
No.
Because exercising isn't easy. Like eating the right foods, maybe it can become easier if you're in the right mindset. It won't feel as difficult once you're on the right track, once you can feel the improvements in your body. But in the beginning, it's certainly something that's really difficult. And like the decline in health that you mentioned, you might say, like, people think it's a natural thing that your health deteriorates as you age. And in a sense, to give the devil its due, basically, in a sense, that's true, because you do become weaker eventually. You do die eventually. Like, obviously something happens with your body, but that's not to say that we just throw our hands in the air and just say, oh, just let's go with it. Let's not do anything against it. Like, obviously we try our best to fight this deterioration, to fight against this decline in health, and I mean, that's basically what you're trying to do, and that's a really good thing.
Yeah. Well, most people, they do. They just expect to deteriorate, accumulate more disease. And I just, with a gun to my head, I can't tell you at what point in age you should start to deteriorate. But it's not at the age of 59.
No.
So I'm stronger today and better performing today at the age of 59 than I ever have been, with a gun to save my life and God being the judge.
Right.
So 59, that's extraordinarily, outside the realm of expectation for the typical person. They just could not grasp that a 59-year-old could be better. So I like to say that in the future, the very best professional soccer players and the very best in our country, our sport of popularity is the NFL, National Football League, so American football. The players in the future will be men and women in their 50s and 60s because they will have preserved their health and have acquired skill sets to play the game better. So the highest performers will be older people. So that's outside the realm of even consideration for the average person, but it is the future. And then you mentioned that it's hard, that exercise is challenging. Well, in the past, we are, for 4 million years as a species, adapted to hard living. And so there's a principle, if you're familiar with it, of selection pressure.
Yeah.
So selection pressure is the force of nature that allows and forced humans to improve. Otherwise, they would be eliminated from the gene pool. So it had the greatest influence on your survival and then your quality of life. So in other words, our lives were so difficult and we had to hunt and we had to fight off threats that it drove us to never do anything bad and to always choose wisely in what would make us better as an individual, and as the individuals improve, the species improves. So selection pressure is no longer present today because people are no longer motivated out of the challenging, rigorous lifestyles that our ancestors formerly lived. So selection pressure has been replaced by something that I have coined selection pleasure. So we like to lay on the couch, we like to eat cookies and ice cream and pizza and drink beer. And so, to the extent, if you're listening today, you can eliminate selection pleasure and replace it with selection pressure by getting insights into the fact that as you do the right things, eliminate the wrong things, you will optimize your body, you'll become more healthy, and the quality of life will be infinitely better. I walk around and exist in a state of mind where I just am so grateful for the health that I have. And I marvel at and am frustrated by the masses that just tolerate disease. And it's just insanity to me. So I enjoy coming on podcasts and doing whatever I can to try to shake people up into this notion of you don't want to just be healthy or get a little bit healthier. You want to be the very best biological version of yourself that you can possibly be, and endeavor to learn what it is to do that, and then embark on that on an hourly basis. So that, and what I mean by that is you don't have to perseverate so much about the topic, but every day, every hour, you make choices about your health and how you're going to, well, about how you're going to live your day. You just have to view it through the paradigm of what will make me better, what is better for me now, and not select pleasure, but select that which is going to make you better.
Yes. Man, you just touch on so many very, very important points here. And how I actually like to focus on all of them simultaneously. But what just popped up is you mentioned better and become the best version of yourself. And I'm like completely on your side here. The issue I see on a societal level, and maybe also on a political level slightly, is that we have trouble agreeing upon what better or optimal means. And I think why I say political is because the idea of like a value itself has been questioned over the past couple years, and it's continuing to happen, and I don't believe that it's necessarily a good thing, because that's where this extreme idea of body positivity comes through, right? When we say that's what we understand as better. If you just feel good about yourself, regardless of objective metrics that tell you anything about your health, the health status of your body. So I just wanted to maybe briefly talk to you about what you think about this specific issue and how to communicate that to people, because obviously we don't want to be what would you say, to be rude to people, to call them names, to discriminate against, but on the other side you kind of have to point out that, look, I'm happy if you feel good or you look into the mirror and you're satisfied with the way you look, but we can still say something is healthier than your current state of the body. Or if you're a smoker, we can clearly say that this is worse for your health than if you were to stop smoking. So what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and I think it's very misleading, this kind of notion of feeling, and a lot of people, I think, derive a sense of pleasure or a feeling good, I should say, out of the fact that when they're drinking beer or they're eating tasty pastries and they're heavy, and say, well, it just makes me feel good. That's the way I want to live my life. So what's different about today compared to our existence for 4 million years is that in the past 4 million years, we lived in probably fairly small clans of humans, maybe around 30, 40, 100, 200 people. And our lives were a constant comparison to the highest performers within that clan. And so we saw that they performed well and that they also lived well. They could do the best things. They didn't suffer from disease. They didn't suffer from symptomatology. They have optimized their lives. So constantly on display and to motivate us was this comparison to the highest performers within our clan. So the notion of the chief, the alpha male and the alpha females, those would have been very apparent to us. Today, it's gone by the wayside. We're not supposed to compare ourselves.
Yes.
Everybody's a winner. Be accepting of the disease. I'm quite confident. Were I to show up, even in my healthier state today, to ancestors of a million years ago, or certainly a group of modern humans, they would flee for the hills to get away from us because their metrics within their brain would have told them these people
Are sick.
really do not know how to live well, and they're not going to contribute to us. So yeah, it's a very slippery slope and delusional, I think, to be tracking feelings and relying on that. My definition of health, and I've never heard anybody else come up with it, is really an expression of your appearance and your performance. So how you look and how you perform. You can't just go by how you look, and you can't just go by how you perform. There are a lot of bodybuilders out there can lift an immense amount of weight, but they perform poorly in life. Like that guy from, I think there's a TV show in America called Game of Thrones. He can lift more weight than any human being. He's the strongest man in the world, but the guy can't do one pull-up.
Wow.
So what is his quality of life? If there was, if he had to go climb a tree, or he had to escape gunfire, or he had to escape a fire in a building, would he be able to get through a window? So it's that awareness that your performance, how you live your life, is a major contributor and should be providing you feedback on the daily basis that you do. So bodybuilders do things that they're pursuing, just becoming the strongest person, that a researcher would not do. So their most important objective is how many plates of metal they can lift up. But health isn't just an expression of how strong you are. It's how fast you can run. It's how you walk. I mean, I can look down a shopping mall, 200 yards ahead of me, and begin forming an impression of how healthy this person is as they're walking towards me. And I can quickly determine if they're young or they're old because of my metrics that I already have familiarity with the aged person who develops infirmity and walks in a certain manner and has a body habitus in a certain manner. So almost without exception, I can arrive at pretty accurate determinations of that. And occasionally I run into, a very rare individual who is exceedingly healthy and kind of defies that. And then sometimes I run into a younger person that's just rapidity of disease has set in so fast that they're in bad shape, and they're actually quite a bit younger than I thought. So it's this notion of looking at metrics, how somebody appears and how they perform, in my opinion, it gives us the best insights into how healthy somebody is.
But then, as you just mentioned, the appearance does play an important role, and we know about things that contribute to health or that speak of a poor health. And it's even worse than that. It's not just that we kind of normalize or maybe even celebrate because it's called like body positivity. And actually what it means is celebrating being fat. And I'm like, no, let's just stop it here. Not only that, we actually do the opposite as well. Not the opposite, but we go as far as hating on, not necessarily hating on, but expressing like negative comments on people that are actually healthy. So society has gone as far as calling people who work out, that's like toxic masculinity. Which drives me nuts. Like your desire to be a strong man is toxic masculinity. Like there are even like there are literally articles written on that, and I saw that on Instagram. I was like, no way is that true, but is that actually true? Or it's being called like right-wing people express their desire to dominate in whatever, going to the gym, and that's how they kind of channel their desire to oppress and to dominate, whatever, like all these crazy things. It's like we celebrate sickness and we devalue health, and that this really drives me nuts. And that's why I think your work is really important in that manner, because you don't just say, well, you can look at a person and tell if that person is sick or healthy, but it correlates with metrics, with health metrics that we can assess, that give us direct insight into whether the person is actually sick or not. You know.
That's so true, and it's an effort towards homogeneity. It's just making everybody. They want everybody to blend in and be the same. No
Yes.
longer value the differences between people, and very often my clients experience that I work with comments from family and friends that go along the lines like you're losing too much weight.
Exactly.
Now I'm really worried about you. You're way too thin. Stuff like that.
Or like, be
To
be
try to.
careful. Don't exercise too much. Don't eat
Yeah,
like
yeah,
all these incredible comments that people make. Be careful not eating too much protein, because too much protein causes whatever. Or don't exercise too much. That's dangerous. Don't lose too much weight, because for whatever reason I don't want you to become healthy.
yeah. Well, just imagine the mind, what goes on in the lonely mind that's laying in a nursing home bed at the age of I don't know 76, and they now have suffered a massive stroke, and they're aphasic. They can't talk. They can't interpret speech. They're paralyzed, and they're in diapers, and they're relegated to an existence of nursing aides that come over and roll them over and clean their diapers and give them institutional food. Now, were that same person provided an opportunity to live lives more like you and I, where health was an objective all along, it wouldn't even be open for discussion. But instead, they've had foisted upon them these deceptive practices where people have pushed them over a slippery slope and made them feel comfortable about acquiring disease. So I like to shake people up and say, look, the expected outcome of the decisions and the lifestyle that you live in right now are urinary and stool incontinence and an inability to get up and out of a chair and enjoy your life and just walk around because you are accumulating a disease at such a rate that is what is going to happen were I to guess correctly for $1 million, win the lottery. And people don't think that way. They do not understand that they just it's this black box. And if they do, they just say, well, you're old and you got disease, and they kind of
Yeah.
accept it. And yeah, I think the masses are heading in that direction. It's the rare individual that leaves the masses like a group of lemons going over a cliff. It's the rare person who departs from that and starts to live differently. But even rarer, Maxim, is as was my experience where I said, well, I get that I'm healthier, but I became aware of this concept of optimization, and it's really rare. I'm starting to see it among some people online. Optimization, really optimizing your health, and I think it's as you acquire more health and disease departs from you, you start to gain insights like, why aren't we doing this more seriously? This really ought to be embraced in this notion of just eating more healthy and exercising. Yeah, it's a good start, but there's so much more
Yeah.
to living than just doing a few things towards to improving your health.
Yeah, sure. And you mentioned old people, and that most of them are so frail that they can't even move. And one thing that I've been grappling with as far as like older people are concerned is what are we exactly to do with them? Because let's presume that most of the problems are caused by too much body fat, too much visceral fat, too much insulin resistance, all these things. Then at their point in life, when they're close to 80, 90 years old, I believe, and tell me what you think about it, that losing substantial amount of weight is gonna be very detrimental to a very old person, because losing weight goes hand in hand with losing lean body mass. And if a frail old human being that already is very low in muscle mass and can't even get up from a chair um, starts losing even more muscle, well, that gets you into that vicious cycle, right? And so I've been thinking about what should we exactly do with older people, because I'm not sure if fasting is the right idea for an old person because of the potential loss of lean body mass, which is already accelerated in older people, right? And so tell me your thoughts on that. The conclusion that I've came to were protein and strength training, obviously, but is there anything else that you would add?
Yeah, well, what I would add is your capacity. You need to improve your capacity of evaluating those interactions. So there's a researcher who's an emergency medicine doctor named Dr. Doug McGuff, and I'll send you a videotape, and I think you may change your mind about this. He owns a gym, and he specializes now in working with older people, getting them to lose weight and to build body mass.
Oh, wow.
So one of the things he talks about is the MRI. Now, he doesn't use it as much as I do, but I use it in all my clients. And what I do is I get 70, 50, 60 people in their 20s all the way up into their 80s. Mm-hmm. And I focus in and I say, it's not the loss of tissue, body weight, it's what you're losing.
Yes.
You want to lose fat, and really not so much sub-Q fat, mm-hmm. but the one that's more metabolically active. Yes. I was on Carl Lenore's recent podcast this week on Superhuman Radio, and he calls it radioactive fat, visceral fat. So it's this very disease-causing substance inside your body. That's what you want to get rid of. So if you do that by fasting, by losing, weight, you want to focus in on that. So the MRI allows us to look precisely at that. So what I do is I optimize the amount of muscle to fat in humans, including 80-year-olds. And I look at not only visceral fat, but myomeostosis, which is something that, I tried, I sent you yesterday, the acquaintance of these fatty infiltrates within muscles. And we see them departing elderly people. So we can see their muscle mass get bigger, the destructive inflammatory fat being eliminated, and it's a great metric to pay attention to. So, yeah,
I just want to open this real quick to show people what we're talking about. That's it. Talk about this.
Yeah. So this is it in gross exam. So were we to carve on a human being in surgery, this happens to be beef, from cattle. The steak on the right is infiltrated with a large amount of deposition of fat. Yeah, that's a marbleized steak, and it's an objective of the industry. So this particular cow was fed a lot of grains, a lot of carbohydrates, corn, soy, molasses, antibiotics, and seed oils. All these practices in a CAFO, confined animal feeding operation, are intended to increase the weight of that animal and increase its profitability, because that's how the meat producing industry makes money, increase profit by getting more on the numbers on the scale. Now, it also has appeals to the taste of humans, and probably the same way that sugar and candy and heroin, it's just these senses you're going after. It doesn't mean a good thing, but it definitely triggers, palatability. Now, the steak on the left is a grass-fed cow, living the life it's supposed to. Now, human beings, you can do an MRI. You could do an MRI on those steaks, and you can see that. Is it this one? But so these are cross sections through the legs. Now, this is amazing. We didn't talk about this the first time we did our show, but cross sections through the legs. These fatty infiltrates.
Let me actually open this. Maybe that's even more revealing.
Yeah, and so to the left of the cross sections of the legs are the abdominal MRI scans. So these abdominal MRI scans show the amount of visceral fat in the center, and fat shows up on MRI as white. And so you can see it in the middle of the abdomen in the individual in the top left corner, and then his legs corresponding are to the right of the image. And the one on the left at the bottom is an Olympic sprinter. And those dark structures are his muscles. So compare the muscularity of the Olympic sprinter to the 63-year-old above. And so the 63-year-old above never acquired that muscularity. And by the way, that is the single best abdominal scan or CT scan I have ever seen of a human being on the entire planet. And I probably looked at hundreds of thousands, if not close to a million or more, scans of the abdomen. And that right there is the healthiest person I ever
Wow.
saw. I mean, the core are the two circles in the middle of his, are those two circles. That's the psoas muscles. And I've never seen psoas muscles like that. And he never
Wow.
did planks. He never lifted weights. In this image here, he simply sprinted. So that's, if you want to get a great core, you want to sprint. And then his legs to the right
Here we go.
are
Yeah.
like filet mignon. They're like tenderloin. There's no deposition of fat. Now, what's interesting is, Maxim, in
Yeah.
your training in medical school, becoming a physician, you will see this. Now, on a CT, it shows up as black. These black infiltrates in the skeletal muscle of
Mm-hmm.
patients that you scan by CT, and MRI shows up as white. Zero comment. You will never find any commentary about those fatty infiltrates or visceral fat. Every CT scan, every CT report that you read will never comment on either visceral fat or myomyostosis fatty infiltrates within the legs. It's remarkable. So my objective before I die is to change the curriculum in medical schools all over the world so that physicians in training begin to understand and become aware of this very important biometric,
Yeah.
because nothing will improve Homo sapiens nearly as much as optimizing their health as getting rid of visceral fat. It all starts with that, and
Yeah.
then myomyostosis goes away, fat around the heart goes away,
Mm-hmm.
atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, clogged arteries open up. But it's a matter of looking at the correct things, and no, in my opinion, the proverbial nobody's looking at the right things unless you're looking at visceral fat, fatty infiltrates, and fat around the heart, and then clogged arteries. Now, as a consequence of doing that,
Mm-hmm.
I pay attention to all these other changes on the outside of the body. I do not believe actually that it's necessary to have an MRI to optimize your health. It's definitely a tool, but
Yeah.
you can track changes on the outside of the body that are consistent with the elimination of visceral fat or the accumulation of visceral fat. When we lived in clans of people, we would have detected change and say, hey, man, or hey, lady, you're accumulating, you're getting less healthy because this is happening to you. Look at the rest of us. And we would bring them back in and say, you got to get out to the hunt, and you got to run a lot faster. You got to work faster. You got to stop, eating so many. I call them fig eaters. Stop eating so many figs or dates.
Yeah.
They go back to the campfire and they just are eating dates and figs, and they don't want to go out and hunt anymore. So I think that's where it all kind of started. But we were way better for 4 million years intervening because of the necessity of working together, and everybody had to perform well to help the clan live and enjoy the best quality of life and defend itself from attacks from other, predators
Mm-hmm.
or other predatory clans that might be in the area. So, yeah, I'm excited as a med student that you're learning about these biomarkers, and please keep in touch with me and let me know your experience as you try to discuss this with other people, because other physicians will just say, yeah, they won't read it. They're not
Yeah.
taught this in medical school. Radiologists, will never report this.
Why?
My
Why do
my
you think
best
that's the case? Like, I mean, if it's clearly a good metric, it's something that we should be focusing on. If it's like, if we have these tools to assess visceral adipose tissue, and if we can derive so much incredibly valuable information from making these scans, why is it that is it ignorance? Is it like willful ignorance? Is it just is there an incentive behind it? Is like what are your thoughts? Because it's something
it's
that
more
doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, it's more ignorance. I mean, doctors are not taught about the dangers of visceral adiposity, visceral fat being dangerous, and the harms of it. And medical was not part of their curriculum. Now, radiologists, I think they know that is all visceral fat in front of them, but because they don't think it's bad, they're not taught about it. And it's this paradigm is if you're not taught it in medical school, or it's not part of your physician practice, it's not important. So
Hmm.
radiologists don't really think it's necessary to report it because they don't know just how bad it is. And
Right.
there's radiologists in line, on Twitter and stuff that I get. It bothers me that they're ignorant of. But one guy actually was arguing with me that kept saying, "Show me studies that visceral fat is bad." And I'm like, "Oh dear
Really?
God, yeah." I was
Jesus.
like, "Just jump on Google yourself." I mean, how offensive, make me to go pull these studies and do. They're all over. You got
Jeez.
patients that know more about this, doctor, than you do if you're asking this kind of question. So yeah, many of my clients, patients who come to me, already very well acquainted with the threat of visceral fat. They can't
Mm.
find any other doctor that can read it, um, and
Or
so
look, I think most physicians have they acknowledge the fact that visceral fat is associated with disease. And that's actually one question I would like to ask you about in a second. But I was taught that visceral fat goes hand in hand with insulin resistance. The question always was which comes first? Is it the hen or the egg, the chicken or the egg? Is it that insulin resistance causes visceral adipose tissue or visceral fat accumulation, or does something cause visceral fat accumulation and that leads to all the other problem? And personally, I still haven't completely figured it out, and that would be my next question to you. Basically, is it because I've several hypotheses? Basically, one possible explanation would be something like an evolutionary inconsistent lifestyle leads to insulin resistance that drives visceral adiposity, and it's just like a metric. It's one of the side effects from insulin resistance. It's like a proxy. The other
yeah.
explanation would be basically the bad lifestyle causes the accumulation, and that leads to increased insulin resistance. So it's actually part of the etiology, part of the pathophysiology, or it's a vicious cycle, basically. So kind of insulin resistance gets triggered by the bad lifestyle, leads to visceral adipose fat, and that leads to even more insulin resistance. And so we get into that negative feedback loop because we continue, or like most people continue living their bad lifestyle. Like most don't quit, and so we have this repeated damage going on. So
Yeah, well,
do you have yeah?
one of the problems we can get into as physicians and researchers is our desire to understand things. Who cares? Get rid of it and watch what the heck
Okay,
happens.
I agree, Doc. Let me look. I agree with that. Like, just get rid of it, and we know that's associated. And if we get rid of it, then things improve. It's just my curiosity. It's just because I'm curious.
Yeah.
I'd like
Well,
to understand.
I don't want to suspend that. I will tell you that I've struggled with that for years too, and I don't have a clear understanding of it anymore. And I realized I got distracted spending time to try to understand the nuances. Listen, we'll never understand the brilliance behind nature,
True.
and were we to desire and end up being distracted by trying to understand, it's less important to be able to explain it to people, and than it is to be able to demonstrate for them in a convincing manner that they have choices to make and their quality of life will dramatically improve if they do that. So the MRI becomes an interesting way of revealing to people how to make decisions. And why I say that is, if I gave you a lab report or a radiology report that quantified your visceral fat to a patient, they're less moved by that than if they actually look at the MRI image. Now, there was a study that came out and showed they took a look at doctors who walk patients through radiology studies, CTs, MRIs, and plain films, and the patients did better. They performed better. They got healthier. And I think it's because of the engagement of the senses. So for
Yeah, that makes
4
sense.
million years, Maxim, we paid attention to our health based on how we looked and how other people look. And that inspired us to make lifestyle changes like, I'm not going to eat as many dates. I'm not going to eat as many figs. I'm going to eat more, organ meat. I'm going to sprint more. I'm going to be out front and be the, alpha in the hunt. I have a desire to perform better. So those kind of things would motivate us better than numbers. And so,
Now we need a
the
study.
trait.
Now you need a study to prove that that's the case.
Well, there's that study.
Well,
I just said
there
that.
even are studies, but I just mean it's little. It became ridiculous that self evident things have to be backed up by, by studies. It was basically what
Oh yeah,
you
yeah, okay, yeah,
the point you
yeah.
made with regards to my question. Like, we so much care about the causal chain and what comes first, what comes second, whereas sometimes it's even more wise to just admit that this actually doesn't matter in the end. In the end, all what that matters is we make that step, we see that things dramatically improve, and that's basically all we need if you want to optimize the process of making people healthy. So if you're really committed to making as many people as possible as healthy as possible, you better not, spend your entire life searching for these mechanisms. You better just go
Yeah,
and act
no,
and
it's
go and
like, yeah,
heal them, you know?
yeah, you're exactly right. It's time for action. And, I've had patients all the time. I show them, and they're just so ticked off when they see that visceral fat
Yeah.
inside of them. Very moving. In fact, I had one patient who completely syncopized, passed out on me. I mean, you can imagine standing up. I show them their MRI image, and they pass out
Wow.
because they're so bothered. And why? They were a tophy. So this is the notion of being thin on the outside. You don't look like you're heavy, but inside you're filled with this visceral fat. So they thought they were healthy, and what they were confronted with, they told me, was, they were trembling after they came to, and they said, "I realize, I'll never forget it. I am a fraud. I thought I was healthy, and the MRI showed me that I wasn't, and I've been deceiving myself all along."
Mm.
And yeah, that person dramatically changed their life. They sold their house, redesigned a new house with all of these features to make it, the importance of health were incorporated into this new house that they designed. I mean, they completely completely changed their life. And so that's the kind of insight that you get when you get this MRI. So if you're listening today, I encourage you to get and you want to look at your visceral fat, don't get a DEXA scan. A
Mm.
DEXA scan is $100. It just gives you a number, it quantifies how much visceral fat you have. Even cheaper than a DEXA scan is a bioimpedance scale for about $25. It gives you a number of how much visceral fat you have. But numbers don't mean as much
Yeah.
as visualize, processing information, looking at the enemy within. So get a CT or a abdominal MRI, and you'll see that enemy within you, and it has a lot more impact on getting you to change your lifestyle and getting committed, because otherwise it's kind of like dipping your toe into a pool. You really got to take a deep dive into this and optimize your health, and numbers just don't improve you as much. So it's like the other illustration I give of this is like a
Hmm.
crypto wallet. So younger generations are really into crypto, older people not so much, but I like crypto, so I'm in crypto. If I gave you a crypto wallet with a bunch of numbers in it, and equivalent of let's say $1 billion, that would excite you and titillate you, but that's all you had. It's not going to have as much impact in your lifestyle as if I give you, you know, five $20 million homes all over the world. I
Mm.
give you a $50 million G5 that's flying you all over the world. I give you, 20, racing motorcycles. I give you, 20 Ferraris. Now we're talking influence in your life. You see,
True.
it's not, numbers are not going to influence you as much as engaging your senses and
Well,
experiencing these kind of things.
especially visually, because we're visual creatures. Like most, a big part of our brain is devoted to processing visual information. So and we don't believe, like we don't trust what we know unless we see it. So we always like to see it. We have a hard time getting something unless we can't imagine it in our head.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you think about visually. Visually is yes, but the power of taste drives people to do craziness, and
Sure,
the feel craziness. Like I have
sure.
an identical twin brother, and I remember he got diverticulitis. Okay, acute diverticulitis, left lower quadrant tenderness, and so he's got this belly pain. I have him lay down. and
Yeah.
I'm diagnosing my identical twin brother, who's my genetic material. I'm pressing my hand on his obese abdomen at the time. Okay, I feel like I'm gonna puke. I'm like, it's like no abdominal exam I've ever done. I'm palpating my twin brother's abdomen, and he's got so much fat in there. I'm getting
Wow.
ill. So the touch, the sense of touch and feel was incredibly operative and was making me like, I will never get fat like my twin brother. And the thing is, he's laying there like he's totally unaware of these heavy. Now he's got diverticulitis and he freaking won't stop eating bread and pasta and pizza and beer. And
Mm.
I'm like, this is crazy, the level of disease and deception that's operative within my identical twin brother. So, yeah, the sense is, I agree with you. Probably majority of people, visual cues are by which they probably do the most amount of processing. But just feel, the capacity to feel. I can feel health just by touch. I can smell health by the sense of smell. The
Mm.
microbiome, the level of health that people have can be revealed, and that's actually goes to attraction. So reproduction, we're attracted to potential partners based on how they smell. Now, to a
Yeah,
large extent,
true.
that's being degraded with soaps and body perfumes and scents and different things, and we're losing that. But for 4 million years, how who got how people were created, procreation and reproduction was guided to a significant part by the smell and the
Yeah.
chemistry that we had in people, and that's
That's so
unfortunately
fascinating, you know?
being, yeah,
Like
it's being
these
lame.
sorts of things, they fascinate me so much because it just tells me, wow, there's like so much that makes sense, like from an evolutionary standpoint, and there are certainly good explanations for that, but it's just it's not well, if you think about it, it is intuitive. It makes sense, but it's not the very first thing you think about that drives kind of selection between partners, right? The smell, even, and what it tells about the partner, like how is it that your brain understands that this is associated with good health and this smell is not associated. Like, this is really complicated, fascinating stuff, and each time I hear these things, just shows me there is so much there's yet to learn about the human body, and you touched on many of these things. One more question to the accumulation of visceral adipose tissue. I mean, to some degree, it's self-evident, but what do you think are the most important culprits here? What are the most important things that have changed in the environment over the past decades that are the most important factors to focus on? Because, like, there thousands of things have changed in our
Yeah.
environment, so it's you can't focus on all of them simultaneously. But if you were to pick, how do you approach that with your patients? What do you tell
Yeah,
them?
so what I do is, maybe pull up that slide with the 6 images of yellow and red colors that
Mm.
talk about, illustrate, rather demonstrate, um, the influence of processed foods. So a
Is
big
it this?
no, that one right there. Yeah, that's it. So, this is a new addition to the Homo sapien diet, processed foods. Formerly, we just ate meat and vegetables in whole form.
Hmm.
But here, this demonstrates in a 68-year-old guy the dramatic improvement once he eliminated processed foods. And with it, that's processed carbs and seed oils and food preservatives and chemicals and things that disrupt basically drive your microbiome in the wrong direction. And so the image in the top left is his visceral at baseline 0. You can see the red is visceral fat, and on his oblique muscles on the left and right side, there's a red streak in the middle of those dark muscles, and that's myomeostosis. We get fatty infiltrates within the muscles,
Oh,
and
here we
then
go. Yeah.
by the time 35 weeks have concluded, this guy has lost his visceral fat in large part significantly. His
Wow.
muscles have now cleaned up. He doesn't have the myomeostosis that he had before. He acquired a six-pack, and now he's
Ha.
got this nice oval-shaped abdomen, more like a 20-year-old than the 68-year-old guy had. Now, the interesting thing is he didn't exercise 1 minute. There's no exercise in here confounding this. He was not exercising. He refused to exercise. He was a
Hmm.
owner of a very large corporation. He was 68 years old, and he said, the only thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out processed foods. So, in my opinion, these series of MRI slides should be taught in every medical school
Yeah.
to every doctor. Every physician around the world should have this in their office to share with every patient. And then every, third grade, first grade health class in schools all over the world should be teaching young children about the harm of processed foods and what
Hmm.
happens to them by allowing them to have insights in this. But nobody shares this. It's remarkable to me. But I hope you will take it into your profession, share it with other colleagues.
I
The other
really hope
thing,
so.
and
I'll
then
try my
maybe
best.
share that one right there. Click on that
This
with the
one
little,
exactly, because
yep,
that's on the
yeah,
other hand. You mentioned
yeah,
the elimination of processed food without exercising, but this has nothing to do with diet, as far as I
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. So now the exact opposite. Now, in this individual, he's 50. Let's see, how old was this guy? 55 at the time. So
Hmm.
he was the CEO of a company, a large company. He had this amount of visceral fat. He came back. This is a repeat scan. I'm like, oh my God, dude, you should have less visceral fat. What are you doing? Are you cheating? Are you eating carbs? Are you not sleeping? Are you stressed out? Or are you drinking alcohol? Those are the four things that I would routinely see. There's a fifth one, chronic exercise.
Aha.
One of those, and I learned the chronic exercise from this one actually. So he said none of those four things, but here's what he was doing. He was running 10 miles a day, 5 days a week, or
Wow.
50 miles total a week. And so he was chronically exercising. And I said, look, our protocol for the National Science Foundation is to have you not jog, not run, but to sprint. So finally he agreed. All right,
Hmm.
I'll start sprinting, I'll stop running. And then look, in less than 2 months, he eliminates almost entirely all his visceral fat. He grows muscle, gets a six pack, and the MRI tech, even before they saw the change inside, came into me and said, Sean, you're not going to believe this guy's jacked now. He's changed so much. So visually, grossly, his body improved that much from sprinting. And when he walked in my office to go through these exams, I really had to jack him up against the wall and say, please do not destroy my science. Do not confuse science. Are you taking steroids? Because I thought maybe, he'd done something to improve,
Hmm.
performance enhancing anabolic steroids or something kind of muscularity. And then no, it was just that one change. So I love the MRI because it allows us to do that. But part of the story is not just what happens inside the MRI, but how much his body changed. So, it's the capacity for, measuring something and doing something to see what changes and remeasuring again. So measure, do.
Yeah.
And that's what I've done for 13 years. Measure, do, measure, do, measure, do. And I'm obsessed with this
Wow.
idea of trying to figure out what it is to optimize human beings, both from the outside of the body and the inside of the body. And I think it's a great approach. That's why I love what I do. I am a health and performance optimizing physician, the only one in the world right now, but I hope to make it a specialty. And really, it
Right.
should be the most common specialty. Every physician should be a health and performance optimizing physician.
That's true.
Instead, there's only one,
Wow.
me. It's crazy.
Well, I think these are very compelling stories that you tell. These two, because they provide a very, what would you say, simple framework on simple steps you can take. Wait one quick second. Simple steps you can take to basically take what would you say, to reverse the horrible decline of your health that so many people experience. And it's like, what I mean by simple is not that's easy to implement, but it's something that's precise. It's something that's graspable to almost every single one of us. If you say focus on higher intensity exercise, don't overdo it, and eliminate processed foods. That's what people can understand, and how you implement that is a completely different conversation, because that's certainly not an easy thing for most people to implement. That's psychology, that's communication, that's proper communication with patients, how you approach change, lifestyle change. And frankly speaking, that's where I see myself going as a physician. So I'm really not interested or called to standard medicine, let's say, which means that the only thing I can see myself doing over the long run that would feel fulfilling to me is help people to what to retain their health, to reclaim their health again that they have lost through whatever they've been doing. And well, I'm on your side. I'm with you with that. And let's
Good.
see what
Well, I'm
happens.
excited to hear you say those things, Maxim, and I challenge you to try to be a force of influence in your position in training your medical school class to try to get others excited about patients reclaiming their health, and also I like the term retaining their health. So, I work to get people to optimize their muscle, reduce their fat. And again, focusing on the right kind of fat. There's a big difference you got to appreciate, and I don't think we spend enough time in medical school distinguishing between heart fat, pericardial fat, fat within the myomyostosis, and tongues, and get them to help patients lose that fat and the bad fat and preserve healthy tissue. Sarcopenia is a huge problem.
Right.
Medical frailty, and I know you must recognize that because you were concerned about older people
Absolutely.
going on fasting, that they're going to become more sarcopenic.
Or like extended fasting,
The scariest of all conditions is sarcopenic obesity. It's the notion of having, it's like that one picture, the worst, that really bad MRI shows a lot of, maybe you could pull that up. It's just this guy's filled with visceral fat inside him, and his very small little tiny.
Here we go.
That guy right there. So he has very small little muscles on the side, but he has a huge amount of visceral fat. This is the guy that passed out. Yeah. And so what happened with him is he could pinch an inch, a little bit of fat underneath the skin, but he had all these friends and everybody else had these giant, enormous folds of fat on the outside. So he thought he was really healthy. So he's got sarcopenic obesity. He's, or the other term I call it is invisible obesity. It's this obesity that's invisible, but it's inside the body. So helping people, the elderly, getting an MRI, and you pay attention to growing the dark stuff. And we see it pretty routinely. Dr. McGuff works exclusively, I don't want to say exclusively, but predominantly with the geriatric population to grow muscle. And, he's disappointed that more physicians don't pay attention to it and work on that. But yeah, I think the MRI and then an informed physician exam to make sure people, here's a cool thing is just the advent, your stomach muscle is if I took your shirt off, Maxim, and you stood in front of people at a beach or a group, you'd have a nice flat advent. Yes. But Maxim, if you don't live your life, when you are my age, you're going to have this bulge. Find a 50, 60, 70-year-old that doesn't have this little bulge in front of you, and I'll say that is a healthy person, because now their muscles are possessing the correct tonicity to hold their enteric content in, their guts in. So the dad bod is nothing more than dysfunctional muscularity that no longer can retain the gastrointestinal tract. So, it's not attractive. It's a manifestation of early onset of sarcopenia, and their quality of life is going to be horrible. So if you're listening today and you got a dad bod, you have no idea about the nightmares you are going to be facing from the consequences of that. So an informed physician perspective that challenges that. And I'm sad to say that probably the majority of physicians training you right now are completely agnostic to the dad bod, and they may even feel compelled to not say anything about it because we're not supposed to be, fat shaming or all this ridiculous thing. No, we've got to hold the line. We've got to push back against this social nonsense that, we should be tolerating disease. we shouldn't. It goes to the quality of life of these people, and they deserve to hear the truth from us from an informed perspective. So I'm so glad you do your podcast. I'm so glad that you're a health advocate. I love to see your refreshing attitude. But you got to take that and you got to share it with other people. Okay. Now,
Certainly,
you got
man.
to go
That's
out to
what this
your
podcast
colleagues.
is about. I'll try to share it with as many as I can, and so far the podcast hasn't been collecting that much traction. But let's see what's going to be happening in the future, because I hope that more and more people will recognize the value of the conversations I have with these with you and with other people, especially with respect to health and health optimization, because I'm not satisfied with disease elimination. I'm not even satisfied with visceral fat elimination. I'm satisfied with optimizing health, which means not just, and I mean, your work is amazing if you say, let's focus on visceral fat, but that's not enough. We also have to focus on muscle. Like,
Yeah.
eliminating disease is one step, but becoming stronger, becoming faster, building that muscle, that's step two. That's something that's the next thing. And obviously these things can go hand in hand, right? If you start sprinting, you will lose visceral fat, you'll become healthier and build muscle simultaneously at the same time. Which is great. I mean, this is so great, because you can just kill a couple birds with the same stone, you know.
Yeah, well, I'm so glad to hear you say that. It does sound like you are very genuine and sincere in your interest in optimizing people, and it's really an exciting world. You're going to do your patients and friends and colleagues a lot of good as you expose them to those challenges. But yeah, try to use MRIs to engage the visual senses to help people learn about optimization and reversal of disease. It's really a great tool to work with. And yeah, I'm excited about you joining the ranks of being a health and performance optimizing physician. And I'm always, interested in doing podcasts. So you can have me back. We didn't get to go through all of the slides today, but there are so many other
Sure.
aspects, to health optimization to always talk about. We didn't even get into the microbiome, which is a hugely important
I've seen you
area.
posting of the past couple of weeks. I've seen you posting more on the topic of the microbiome and fermented foods, and that's definitely something have not that's not been focused enough on, I would say. Even though we talk about the microbiome all the time, and the microbiome here and there, and I personally have no idea what it does, and we're taught about the existence of the microbiome that's connected to a bunch of things, but there's not more that I could tell you as far as my knowledge is concerned. It's real limited, so I definitely love to dive into that next time I have you on.
Great, great. Well, I look forward to discussing with you. It's probably the single most important area in the future that we should be focusing in on is the microbiome. It's just a lack of understanding and insights in what it is and what those particular species do. They're 30 to probably 60, 70 trillion organisms, of which we don't really know what they do,
Right.
whether they're harmful, beneficial. And so in time, we're going to be mapping that all out. It's the second phase of the Human Genome Project, in fact, is to map out the genome and the microbiome. So very, very significant, very exciting. And I would love to come back and talk about the microbiome.
Awesome. Well, I don't know. You're probably not. You probably won't have endless time to chat. I certainly enjoyed chatting with you a lot. And is there anything for now that we have missed so far? I know there's 10,000 more things that we could go into, but for now, anything else? Final comment? Any conclusions that you
Yeah,
would
so
make?
the last thing I've been really trying to challenge people about is if
Mm-hmm.
you're listening today and it's likely you probably have never had an abdominal MRI, but there's a good chance you've had a CT of your abdomen. Many CTs, abdominal CTs are done, but absolutely with certainty, you've never had your visceral fat read in that CT.
Yeah.
So what you want to do is pull up your CT, get your abdominal CT. Don't look at the report because the doctor wouldn't have read it. Get the images yourself. You want to see those images And just from watching Maxim's podcast here, you have an idea about what is good and what is bad, and take a look at yourself and say, "Hey, what do I got going in here?" And you'll see that most likely you've got a lot more visceral fat inside of you, the enemy within that's staring back that you previously never knew about it. It's like a growing cancer in there that's been tolerated. So yeah, if you're listening today and you've had a CT, abdominal CT in the past, get it, pull it, look at those images yourself. Try to find somebody who's passionate about visceral fat to get rid of it. I'm trying to get as many people as possible within the physician realm and provider realm. And if doctors don't start doing this, I'm going to teach health coaches
Right.
that work to optimize people in inside gyms and different areas, get them to adopt an understanding and awareness of visceral fat. But I have increasingly doctors coming to me that want to learn more about it. They're afraid of it. They're afraid. What they're afraid of is their ignorance about it. They don't know about it.
Sure.
So yeah.
Well,
So
we have to be open enough to admit, to confess, to admit, to be like, yes, we are ignorant. We have no idea about health optimization. We doctors, we are being taught which treatments to use in a setting of a disease, especially if it's acute. We have no idea how to treat chronic conditions. We have no idea how the environment impacts our health, etc., etc., etc. But the really promising thing that people can take as a take-home message from this podcast is basically that it's never too late, right? Even if you see you have a bunch of visceral fat, you're really sick as hell, there's still steps you can take to do something about it, right? You shouldn't be like, oh my god, my life is over. Like, there are steps you can take. You can start acting now and become better. Maybe you'll never become as healthy as this Olympic sprinter guy, but I mean, there's still steps you can take to at least become as healthy as you can manage within the time frame of our life.
Yeah. Well, we covered that in our podcast here, just how dramatically fast just eliminate processed foods. So
Exactly.
just imagine, like you said, we did sprinting. Well, what if you eliminated processed foods, you added in sprinting, and then other beneficial practices that we didn't get into, like the sauna and cold plunge showers. And fasting. These all create chaperone proteins. They're hermetic practices. These chaperone proteins, which if you don't know about chaperone proteins, Maxim, you better get your butt on the internet, jump into PubMed, and read chaperone proteins, because there's an interesting study that came out the past year that talks about chaperone-mediated autophagy. Okay, and it's basically through production of chaperone proteins, we can track this activity, through lysosomal analysis and evaluation of lysosomal activity. And in stroke patients that have had strokes, the ones that have the highest amount of CMA activity, chaperone-mediated autophagy, these chaperone proteins, they never stroked again.
Oh, wow.
No more strokes. And stroke patients just go on to have more strokes because they keep living the bad life they lived that caused them to have a stroke, and the physicians never tell them otherwise. But in that same study, the ones that had the lowest amount of CMA activity, they always went on to have strokes, with the exception of one person in that lowest level. And it's probably because the study wasn't long enough. They're eventually going to stroke out and get the big one.
Possible.
So you really want to pay attention. Chaperone proteins. And chaperone proteins happen when you do hormetic exercise, like sprinting is probably the very best form of exercise to produce chaperone-mediated chaperone proteins. So super. I love autophagy. I love the microbiome. We can get together and talk again.
Definitely.
Do another show on both of those topics.
Definitely on those, and I'd like to get into sauna and into the sun, because that's definitely a topic that's very controversial for some reason that I don't understand. It's to some degree it's backwards. We tell people to avoid meat, to not go into the sun, to not do all these things, to be fat. That's like fat acceptance. It's backwards. It's crazy.
Yeah, Yeah, it's exactly right. We were adapted perfectly to the sun. It's been around probably a billion years or
Mm,
more. We've been around 4 million years. We're adapted to the sun, and then we're telling people to avoid it.
yeah.
But yet the same dermatologist, remarkable, the same dermatologists that tell you to avoid the sun now have you in front of machines that are create sun lamps that they're treating in their practices.
Yeah.
Different things like eczema, psoriasis, or whatever,
Yes.
using these artificial man-made machines. And because they make money off it, they'll go ahead and have you sit in front of baking in front of this ionizing energy. But yeah, the sunshine it's crazy. Sunshine is absolutely one of our protocols that I use to
Yes.
optimize people. It creates chaperone proteins
That's
and many
interesting.
other beneficial practices. So I like to say I'm the tannest person in all of Minnesota because
Perfect.
I concentrate so much on sunshine. Mhm.
Perfect. Well, I believe you're doing everything right, or at least most of the things right. Because how old were you? You said 50. Was it 58?
I'm 59. 59.
59. So just
Yeah.
for people to understand, they should Google Dr. Sean O'Mara, look at some of the pictures, and judge for themselves whether this is an appropriate age for you.
Yeah. I'm on Instagram. I'm on
Yeah,
Twitter.
tell tell
And
tell tell us where people can find
yeah,
more
so
about
you
you.
can you yeah, so you can find me on Instagram at DRSEANOMARA. The same handle also for Twitter at
Hmm.
DRSEANOMARA.
Mm-hmm.
And then on YouTube, I'm Dr. DR period SEANO apostrophe, that little thing, MARA on YouTube. And then I have my own website, www.drseanomara.com. I
Mm-hmm.
work with just a few, I'll just tell people like, oh, lots of people hear me and they want to work me. I work with very few people.
Hmm.
The few people I work with are those that are super motivated. And the reason is the ones that are most motivated, I can learn the most from. They do everything I tell them to do.
Yeah.
And I enjoy that practice. The ones that are less motivated and they keep struggling, they can't stop eating pizza and stuff like that. They're very difficult to work with, and you can't study them. There's not as much change in them.
I
But
see.
I do also work with people that are very obese, that are filled with cravings, and I teach them about them. And it could be like the subject of our next talk will be the microbiome. So I
Hmm.
change their microbiome, all their cravings leave. They no longer eat that bad food if they follow this particular protocol. So yeah, through microbiome optimization, you can stop all those cravings. But yep, if you're
Awesome.
listening and you're very interested in maybe optimizing, they can click on my website and learn a little bit more about working with me.
Great. Well, thanks a lot for your very valuable insights today, and I was really happy that we had the opportunity to talk again. It was great to have you on.
Well, great, Maxim. I look forward to doing another show with you,
Perfect.
and wish you all the best until we talk again.
All right. Thanks a lot.